For years, a mystery has been brewing. What's up with DIA, Denver International Airport? This is what's up with Denver International Airport. It's a giant waste of taxpayer money. It's a cash hole. It's a fucking eyesore, and it's the worst thing about Denver, like, hands down. That's the abridged truth about DIA, but if you want to hear me shit on DIA for a while longer, then stick around, because my gripes with DIA are beyond measure, and I can shit on DIA for hours. For the sake of brevity, though, I'll focus on a few points as to why I think DIA ought to be demolished and taken into the landfill, like the shitty tourist trap that it is. All the time I hear from people, "Hey Nick, you should visit DIA. You should check out DIA. You should check out the tunnel, and you should check out the runway, and you should check out all the cool spots at DIA." And I'm not going to do that because you have to take a toll road there and pay like $5 or $3 just to drive to the fucking place. But if you take public transportation like I do, and you take the light rail there, you have to get a special kind of ticket to enter what's called the airport zone. So I'm not going to DIA. In fact, I've never been to DIA, and I don't plan on going to it anytime soon. But all the pictures I see of it look absolutely disgusting, and they're insulting to Native American culture, because apparently they're supposed to look like teepees on the plains, but it looks instead like someone TP'd the planes. That's how fucking ugly this ramshackle collection of fabric cloths draped over sticks is. DIA is what ruined Denver. It devalued our position on a national level and made it so that we were just another destination and stopping point, and people could really easily leave us and arrive at us, and there was no permanency anymore. And that's not the case with any other American city. No other American city fetishizes its airport to the extent that Denver does. Chicago doesn't fetishize O'Hare International Airport and put giant posters and billboards everywhere going, "Wow, it's O'Hare International Airport," because that's a normal city, and in normal cities, airports are just seen as places you go when you absolutely need to, and don't go if you don't need to. And ideally, you should stick around in the fucking city and check the city out, and not just think about leaving, because, that's fucking stupid. No other city advertises a way to escape it like Denver does. We should be encouraging people in Denver to stay here and build a life for themselves and create a healthy, functioning ecosystem and a self-sustaining economy like we had during Denver's golden age in the 80s and 90s, when it was recognized as an American metropolis on the scale of any other. It was respected as the equal of every other American city. We should be focusing on building a self-sustaining economy that perpetuates itself on its own and doesn't rely on outside influence or weed money from tourists. Now, I should make the argument that I'm not anti-marijuana. I think marijuana is wonderful, but I do think Coloradan lobbyists who press for weed to remain illegal in other states are really just shooting ourselves in the foot, because if marijuana was legal everywhere and everyone who needs to smoke weed could just smoke weed in their goddamn own state instead of coming here just to smoke weed, then it'd be a lot more balanced and even across the board. And weed should just be federally legal at this point. It's fucking stupid for it not to be. I personally don't smoke weed because I'm autistic, and if I smoke weed, then it fucks my brain up, and I can't function for like a month straight, because, weed is a psychoactive substance, and that should be kept in mind. But at the same time, I think weed should be legal nationally. Like, that's just a given. There's no reason why you should be arrested for weed. And if I was arrested for weed in some other pumpkin state, I'd be like, fuck you, it's weed. Deal with it. But I don't smoke weed, so that'll never be an issue for me. Point being, I think Colorado is too reliant on weed revenue. That's part of it. Like, the nascent entertainment industry here doesn't see any fucking money. You're not gonna see any of that weed money poured into, like, creating movies or books or fucking art. You're not going to see any of the local bands here getting any of that sweet, sweet weed jackpot. It just goes to the fucking dispensaries, and it just stays with the fucking dispensaries. And then everyone just buys weed, but you never see any money move out of the weed. It doesn't go out of the weed. So, like, Denver's economy is functionally broken, and we rely too much on the outside world when, due to our isolation, we should focus instead on just creating a sustainable ecosystem and functional economy right here. Businesses that actually flourish and thrive independent of whatever the jackasses on the coast want. But that's probably not the reason you clicked on this video. You want to hear the juicy details about DIA. Is DIA a New World Order or Illuminati hotspot? Are there secret gatherings in the basement? Well, no. DIA is a poorly constructed, ramshackle waste of everyone's money that was built in a couple years because we had an exorbitant amount of funding. And when you have a ton of money and not much time to work within, what you get is a building that looks like shit, and that's obviously going to draw some suspicions, and conspiracy theories are going to be created around it. But yeah, the reason DIA looks like so shit, and the reason there's a runway in the shape of a swastika and whatever, is just because nobody thought this fucker through. Because it wasn't a building created with love and passion and attention and care and the world's best architects on it. It was just an afterthought because we were so focused on getting that sweet, sweet tourism revenue and milking that for all it's worth. We didn't bother to think, hey, maybe we should make an airport that looks good. Maybe we should hire artists who know what the fuck they're doing instead of hiring this amateur muralist and this craptastic sculptor to create gaudy, tacky fucking garbage for us. I used to shit on the Big Blue Bear a lot because I thought it was kind of corny and kind of cheesy and didn't accurately represent Denver. I mean, maybe it represents Colorado as a whole because there are bears in Colorado, but there aren't any fucking bears in Denver. So I was like, why the fuck do we choose an animal that doesn't even live here to represent us? But I fucking hate Blucifer. I cannot fucking stand that thing. And compared to the Big Blue Bear, I mean, the Big Blue Bear is at least like a well-constructed statue. I wish, of course, that Denver would just like make a statue of one of its local icons, you know, like a person who actually like achieved things locally and give some credit and recognition to our local celebrities. We need to ditch the image of Denver as a woodsy mountain retreat and start embracing the image of it as a 21st century metropolis that pumps out sludge and is coated in pollution, because that's what it is. And I don't even particularly mind that. I fucking love the city and I don't even really like nature, so I'd like to see Denver recognized as like New York or LA's equivalent in that regard. Here's a take on Blucifer I'm sure you've never heard before. I've never heard anyone say this before. I want to see Blucifer fucking neutered and turned into glue, like the fucking abomination he is. I've never actually seen Blucifer in person, because I've never been to the fucking airport and don't plan on going to the airport anytime soon. But if Blucifer is as fucking ugly as he looks, then I just want to see him fucking scraped off and put into a big vat and just fucking turn him into glue. I mean, I'm fucking done with this stupid fucking horse. I'm so fucking sick of this thing. This thing that doesn't even represent Denver. Fuck it. Burn it to the ground. Oh, I bet that seems a little harsh for all the people who just see Denver as this collection of assorted tourist traps. But I guarantee I'm one of the most endemically Denver people you'll ever meet. I haven't actually met anyone in all my time in Denver who's as intrinsically connected to this place as I am. And Blucifer doesn't have jack shit to do with Denver, and it's pathetic to think that there are people who actually think it does. And I brought this up, you know, that Blucifer's ugly as fuck and it belongs in a landfill. And no city should just celebrate itself on the basis of its ugly fucking statue that was built relatively recently just on the backs of, you know, fucking taxpayer money that should be going towards, like, you know, roads and shit instead of this giant gaudy tourist trap. And everyone is saying, oh, you're shitting on Blucifer, you're shitting on a Denver institution. But I live here, and my ancestors have roots going back here 100 years, so I think I'm entitled to say what is Denver and what isn't Denver. Lucifer isn't Denver. In fact, none of DIA is Denver. None of it's even in Denver. Boulder is more Denver than DIA is Denver. DIA is so far removed from Denver that it's not Denver at that point. It's like fucking Limon, you know. It's out on the plains, and it has planes coming and going to and from it, and I can't fucking stand that. Which brings me to my next point, which is that airplanes are just the absolute fucking worst mode of transportation. They're fucking terrible. I hate airplanes. If I ever do leave Denver, if for whatever reason I ever have a hankering to go to Chicago or Detroit, I'd only go to inland cities. I wouldn't go to the coasts. But if I ever do go to Chicago or Detroit for whatever reason, or Milwaukee or something, I will not be taking an airplane. I'll be taking a fucking train, riding the rails, all aboard choo-choo chugga-chugga, because the trains built America from the ground up. They're one of the most important American industries, and they have a connection to Denver because back in the day, Denver actually became the powerful capital of Colorado that it is because the train companies built a line through here. So the entire reason Denver is a place to begin with, like a really popular big-time city, is because the train used to go through here, and still does, in fact. The train does still go through here. So if I ever leave Denver, I won't be hopping onto DIA. I'll be hopping onto a fucking Amtrak because I don't like going 30,000 feet up in the fucking air. I think airplanes are stupid, they're inefficient, they're extremely polluting. They're just a craptastic way to go. The other factor that deters me from taking an airplane anywhere is, of course, because all airports are like maximum security prisons these days because of 9/11. Maybe this is normalized for some people to go through a million scanners and have to put all your belongings onto the carousel, and then you get on the plane and they're like, oh, you have 1.4 quarts too many of shampoo. Oh, you have scissors because you're sewing? Well, fuck that. We're going to confiscate this and you'll never see it again. I just don't know who wants to travel like that. What a fucking headache. And I understand that a lot of people have just kind of taken TSA and Homeland Security for granted, but as a person with a perspective on history who understands that history is a long process of cause and effect, and I have a lot of temporal perspective, I recognize that the TSA and Homeland Security didn't always exist, and in fact they're two of the agencies that America should definitely get rid of, because much like DIA, they're just a giant waste of money and never actually accomplish anything. I still have no idea who the fuck respects George W. Bush for initiating the Iraq War after 9/11. That was a completely ludicrous response to a minor terrorist attack that killed 1/100th of the people in Hiroshima. And it's not like we fetishize or remember or place any particular significance on the date of Hiroshima every year. As a Denverite, I don't care about 9/11 because it happened 2,000 miles away, and the World Trade Center really is just like a blight, just an eyesore. I look at those buildings and I'm like, yeah, we were a little too gung-ho about just like reckless capitalism back in the day. We were a little too celebratory of the fact that America is like the dominant force on the world's economic stage. You know, I doubt the average frickin' guy from Burkina Faso looks at the World Trade Center and goes, wow, you know, I'm so glad that America has an economic stranglehold on the world's currencies. That's great. That's so cool. Yeah, I fucking love the World Trade Center. You know, the World Trade Center just was like an ugly fucking structure. Almost as ugly as DIA. Not quite as ugly as DIA, but almost as ugly as DIA. And there's an album that was made like a couple years after 9/11 called Fuck World Trade by this punk band called Leftover Crack. And it's pretty funny. It's just them standing in front of the World Trade Center and like giving it the big middle finger. And I think it's important to recognize stuff like that because it shows that America wasn't just this giant patriotism-blinded hive mind back in the early 2000s. You know, some of us actually had critical faculties still in place, and we were able to recognize, some of us, a scant few, that 9/11 was clearly just a propaganda tool that George W. Bush was able to use to pretend like he accomplished something important, even though if he was actually a competent president, he would have just made sure that a plane wasn't heading for the most populated area of New York and was instead heading for the airport, which is a relatively basic thing to account for. If anything, 9/11 signifies America's just fucking incompetence in like using a basic fucking radar system. How it happened is anyone's fucking guess, but it's not like it's ever going to fucking happen again, because like I assume the average air traffic controller has a basic handle on like radar and shit. I assume that the professionals who we task to run these facilities, these airports per se, are capable of noticing when an airplane isn't heading for the airport and is in fact heading for a giant fucking city. I have no idea how that happens. Nonetheless, I think it's important to actively shit on the legacy of 9/11 because it's the moment when America became a bunch of neurotic jackasses, and that's nothing to honor, that's nothing to celebrate. We were much cooler and more chill back in 1999 and 2000. You can actually see in real time, if you look at movies from 1999 or 2000, how cool and fresh and awesome they were. You know, we got movies like Fight Club coming out, awesome shit. You know, not a lot of neuroticism in that, and you know, and the subplot of that movie actively is like blowing up buildings, and it's just like, you know, America's a cool, fun, chill place. And then, you know, 9/11 comes around and suddenly we're just a bunch of fucking losers and we're just like paranoid and we're constantly like, when's the next 9/11? When's the next 9/11? Oh no. And the next 9/11 never fucking came, and instead we just went over to Iraq and killed a shit ton of civilians and wasted a bunch of money on a bunch of American troops who didn't even need to be over there, because Iraq didn't even initiate 9/11. It was in fact Saudi Arabia, but of course George W. Bush didn't send troops over to Saudi Arabia because Dick Cheney has personal connections with the Bin Laden family, who had a stake in his war machinery company Halliburton. And this isn't a conspiracy theory, it's well-documented fact, but of course we don't typically acknowledge that. I think it's sad that so many conspiracy theories have come about 9/11, like Bush did it. Bush is way too fucking stupid to pull something like that off. If you think Bush could actively pull something like that off, you're extremely naive, because Bush was a fucking simpleton. But what Bush was able to do is just make New York's World Trade Center seem like the most important American monument, even though, much like DIA, it was just a tourist trap eyesore, and be like, oh no, we don't have the World Trade Center anymore, whatsoever are we going to do? I know, let's invade Iraq and kill a bunch of civilians, that'll fix this. And there are still Americans today who support that decision and act like George W. Bush was anything even approaching a competent president. But the truth of the matter was, we didn't need to respond to 9/11 like that. We easily could have just gone after those who were responsible instead of starting a fucking war. We could have just had an extremely small-scale, targeted raid on Bin Laden's compound. That would have sufficed. So 9/11, more often than not, is used as pro-George W. Bush propaganda, which I think is fucking insane 20 years after the fact, and that's why I actively choose, like leftover crack, to staunchly voice my opposition towards observance of 9/11, because I really just think it's a justification for Islamophobia. And as an atheist, whenever I see, you know, Christians shitting on Muslims, I'm like, grow the fuck up, both of you. You know, just run the fucking world like a competent group of adults and stop whining about your imaginary characters and how they interact with each other. It's like a world run by a bunch of fucking Yu-Gi-Oh players. Anyway, this kind of got off topic, but the point I hope to make is that as a Gen Zer, I don't care about 9/11 because I was born after it. The same way there are so many generations who were born after Pearl Harbor these days that don't remember Pearl Harbor, probably couldn't name its date if you asked them. And that's just because that's how the passage of time works, and eventually you're going to have people, new people, being born who weren't alive for what may have been important to you during your lifetime. Like, for instance, there are people alive today, young people alive today, believe it or not, who weren't alive for the 2008 financial recession, whereas I was. There are people out there today whose lives weren't really affected by the economic crash. And I'm perfectly willing to accept that there are people younger than me and people older than me. And the people older than me have seen events that I wasn't aware of and didn't have access to, and the people younger than me don't have access to events that I was there for. And that's just how the passage of time works. So eventually, all these drooling Bush fanatics who, for whatever reason, in 2024 or 2025 are still worshiping George W. Bush and acting like his response was anything even closely approaching a competent one, we'll have to just accept that nobody gives a shit anymore, and 9/11 has just become history, like Pearl Harbor, and it's no longer a current prescient event, and there's not going to be a 9/11 too. And I have to wonder at that point if we're just going to ditch the TSA and Homeland Security, because they are seriously like the two least necessary government agencies in existence, and all they do is make air travel worse, less efficient, and terrible and miserable for everyone. And when I go to take a nice vacation, if I want to take a nice vacation to a nice fun spot, the last thing I need is to be treated like I'm a fucking jihadi maniac with the fucking, detonator in my suitcase. I just want to be presumed innocent until guilty, and that's the standard for most of America until you enter these weird extra legal zones like airports, which may as well just be fucking Guantanamo Bay at the point they're at. I openly raise the middle finger to airports. Here in Denver, the actual attraction that we should be celebrating and honoring is Union Station, which is 100 fucking years old, and a beautiful, beautiful, well-designed and built piece of architecture, and signifies Denver's intrinsic connection to the train industry. And whenever I go to Union Station, I feel extremely fucking safe. There's transit police around, there's a couple security guards and stuff, and they have like metal detectors that you walk through when you walk through the door, but you don't have to like take your entire suitcase apart and plop it onto the conveyor belt, and it goes around this entire contraption and a million fucking scanners that scan for, fucking polyurethane and all this shit. It's just a normal ass place, and you get on a fucking bus, and you can just take your suitcase on there, head up to Boulder and Ederland for a day, and it's a nice relaxing process. You don't feel like you're constantly under surveillance, even though, you are. There's cameras set up and shit, but it's not like a paranoia-infused spot where you feel like your life is actually in danger. I don't feel safe at airports. I feel extremely neurotic. I mean, I've never been to an airport, like I said, but if I ever was, I just feel miserable the whole way through, and I wouldn't be able to do anything when I got to the spot that I was dropped off at, because I'd just be like, well, dang, am I on some kind of FBI watch list now? Again, that's literally the only effect that 9/11 actually had on America. I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, it lulled us out of this false sense of security that we were in. We felt really safe until 9/11. Then we realized that there were active threats out there. And it's like, no, America's the most safe fucking country in the world. You're way safer here than you are in Iraq or Afghanistan or any of those other theocratic nonsense countries. You're extremely safe in America. And I think that needs to be recognized, that odds are, like, the odds of you actually dying in some kind of crazy terrorist attack are, like, basically nil, right? That's not going to happen. But we're just conditioned from birth now into this default state of neurotic paranoia because of something that happened 22 fucking years ago. And I think that's sad and pathetic, and America needs to get a fucking grip on itself and move the fuck on and just acknowledge, hey, it happened once, but We're not going to let it happen again. But at the same time, we don't need to put a fucking TSA and Homeland Security at every airport. We can just use a fucking radar system and put a little button in every airplane that just makes it, land safely if it goes off course. Fucking simple. Basic technological innovation. It could save a lot of lives. The argument I mean to make is that only humanity is responsible for its own condition and state of mind, so if we wanted to, we could just make airports more pleasant to go through and a better experience for everyone and stop treating them like they're the most important goddamn sacred sites on this fucking earth. But we're not gonna do that, and everyone says, oh, well, you can't travel back in time, and it's like, yeah, the fuck you can. You can adopt whatever kind of disposition you want. It's just a matter of mental control, self-control, and the ability to monitor yourself and observe how you're going. And if you're kind of devolving into a fascist dictatorship like we were back in the 2000s, when you couldn't so much as criticize George W. Bush without being put on a watch list, you can course correct for that. You can monitor your own behavior as a fucking country, and if you're becoming incompetent, if you're becoming a little fucking broken, you can stop that. You can put an end to that. It's just an excuse to be like, oh, well, we can't control how we approach travel. Yeah, the fuck you can. Like, let me give you a good example of a relevant thing that is also like a Denver thing, right? The Century 21 Theater in Aurora, back in the day, it was just a normal movie theater. It was just like every other movie theater. It was just like the AMC at Cherry Creek. It was just like the AMC in Littleton. Average spot. You go in there, get a popcorn, sit the fuck down, watch a fucking movie. Then the Dark Knight shooting happened. This dickwad James Holmes comes in, and much like Chris Watts, that guy who moved here and then just killed his wife and kids, because I guess he thought that was legal here in Colorado, because he figured, marijuana's legal, so familicide must be legal too. I guarantee all these fucking maniacs coming here aren't, they haven't been in Colorado for 100 years like my fucking family has. They're just a bunch of fucking bandwagoners and tourists and shit. This asshat James Holmes, he comes into the Century 21 Theater, shoots the place out. These days, if you go to the Century 21 Theater, they don't let you carry a bag in. So if you want to sneak in some candies or some fucking chips, they don't let you do that. Every other theater, they take a lax approach. Hands off, you can take in a candy. Give a shit. It's technically against the rules. Get on in there, you little movie gremlins. Going to another movie theater is a fucking fun experience, a great night out. You go to the Century 21 Theater, and there's like 2 cops standing at the door. They've had to pay for 2 cops for an entire fucking decade just because they assume that there's going to be some copycat crime going on, and they have to like put you through a metal detector and scan you before you go in and shit. And it's just like, who the fuck wants to go to the Century 21 Theater anymore? It fucking sucks. It's the worst fucking experience in Denver because they've adopted an attitude of neurotic paranoia that it lowers their sales, it lowers their customer base substantially because nobody wants to go to this fucking place. Because even if you want to move on and forget the horrible fucking tragedy that happened there, you just fucking can't, because they're constantly reminding you of it by just wasting money on 2 entire cops who just sit outside all day. And it's like, what a fucking pathetic environment. What a sad, languid place. And this is how I worry Denver will get if we fetishize DIA enough, if we place too much cultural importance on this waste of money eyesore that's just a neurotic fever dream, instead of focusing on the actual fucking city itself, which there are people who come here and they don't even know that Denver's a place. They just come to DIA, buy a fucking t-shirt at the gift shop with the Denver flag on it, and then fucking leave without ever experiencing any of the wonderful, wonderful fucking things that Denver has to offer. Any of the amazing, cool shit that Denver has on display. They'll never see the Santa Fe Arts District. They'll never see South Broadway in the middle of the night. Never see Spear and Alameda. They're just like, yep, I've seen all there is to see. I'm here at DIA. Wow, it's the wacky conspiracy place. Let me fly home now. Oh boy, it's run by the Illuminati. Hey honey, did you know that this place is a secret base for the Illuminati? No, it's a secret base for a money pit that they just shovel money into down in the basement. Hey, there's a new theory. I'm starting this one up, right? Giant vortex of money. It's like that pit in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, right? That they try and lure him into, the big pit of fire. Except instead of luring Indiana Jones down there, they just have a big vat of money. And they just toss that in there. Yeah, that's where all the Denver money goes. That actually makes a lot of sense, way more than DIA being an Illuminati breeding ground. There are concerts that I've been to that cost like $300 and you have to wait in this giant line and get scanned when you go in. And then there's concerts I've been to that cost like $10 and you just go the fuck in. And it's like, which experience would you rather have? Would you rather have an experience of neurotic paranoia? Or would you rather have a cool, chill experience that's 1/10 the price and is much more entertaining and enjoyable? And that's how I feel about trains and planes comparatively. Like, trains aren't that much more expensive comparatively than planes. You can get a decent trip on a train if you book early and really plan it out. But just the amount of peace of mind that you feel when you go on the train, when you ride the rails and experience America the way it was meant to be experienced, as an entire continent of wonders rather than a little patchwork of ants that you can just dash over in a couple fucking hours. Riding the trains is a great way to actually connect yourself with this wonderful continent of ours instead of embedding yourself in a fever dream patchwork of neurotic paranoia. And nobody should like neurotic paranoia. Neurotic paranoia is an ass state of mind that is not worth getting into. Anyway, point being, DIA is a pathetic landscape and it signifies some really ugly things in American history. So as an actual Denverite who actually appreciates Denver history, I will always celebrate Union Station. And I'll even go so far as to honor Stapleton International Airport, which they could have just kept and changed the name of. I mean, obviously there's a push these days to stop naming things after Stapleton. You could have just kept Stapleton International Airport around and then renamed it Denver International Airport because it was an airport that actually functioned like how I believe an airport should function and wasn't neurotic and wasn't a tourist trap and was just an airport and people could just go in and leave or fly in and there wasn't this entire fucking unhealthy cult mob mentality formed around it that is obviously just a fucking marketing stunt. Like if you claim that DIA is an Illuminati breeding ground or anything, you're just a fucking rube who's pushing money into the hands of these asshat developers and shit. And that's the real conspiracy. It's not the Illuminati. It's not the fucking New World Order. It's just every party with a vested interest to destroy Denver. And every fucking time you mention Lucifer, this is the only time I'm going to mention fucking Lucifer, by the way. I hope that fucker gets turned into glue. Every time you mention any of that shit, it's just free marketing for all the real estate conglomerates and all the shitters who come into Denver, gentrify the fuck out of it, and fucking ruin it for everyone. So just don't do that. Let's start mentioning Union Station, talking about hopping the Amtrak, talking about those fucking freight cars that pass through the rail yards. Those are fucking awesome. Union Pacific, all that shit. Let's start talking about trains. Let's stop talking about fucking airplanes. Fuck airplanes, forget them. They're fucking stupid. Let's talk about building a reliable rail infrastructure like Europe and China have got. Well, let's talk about that, huh? Let's start up on that. Let's build some fucking bullet trains that can just whisk you from Denver to wherever in a couple hours, just like the planes can. There's no reason why we can't fucking do that, and maybe we could fucking do that if we stopped sinking money into fucking DIA. There's a project currently going on that I'd like to draw more people's attention to, especially Denverites. This is something that you should be actively funding money towards. It is one of the most exciting projects I've ever heard of, and it sounds fucking awesome. But Governor Polis has apparently put in place plans for an actual rail system, just like in the old days, because this used to be a thing. You used to be able to take a train from like Cheyenne all the way down to Taos. And there used to be so many more local rail systems that actually function. So Jared Polis is funding an initiative that sponsors rail travel that goes from like Boulder to Fort Collins to Cheyenne to Denver to Colorado Springs to Pueblo to Trinidad to Taos. That'd be so fucking useful to unify the entire Front Range metropolitan corridor so that you could actually like get to fucking Pueblo in a couple hours. That'd be so fucking awesome. And I really hope that comes to fruition in my lifetime. I don't hope we land on Mars or anything. I just hope there's a free, easy way for us to get to Pueblo, for people like me who don't have a car, to easily get to Pueblo without having to pay like $40 for a Greyhound bus. We could just take a fucking train down there for like $10. That'd be so fucking awesome. And it would help build a sustainable economy between like cities that actually do have a lot in common, like Boulder and Colorado Springs and Pueblo. You know, it would really strengthen the Coloradan economy for all Coloradan cities to actually be like unified and feel like they're part of something unique, instead of just like a fucking tourist trap that people just pass through on their way from one coast to the other coast. I think it would really help if we could like see strength in our unity amongst ourselves as Coloradans, as Denverites, as Boulderites, as Puebloans. I think that'd be fucking awesome. So you should actually be pouring money into this rail system idea because it's so fucking cool, and I would love to see that instead of DIA. Maybe you could like take DIA apart, sell all its scrap metal, you know, all its components, which all things considered are probably worth quite a bit. We could just, you know, take all that, sell that to a construction firm or something, and use the resulting income to fund this amazing fucking rail system, because goddamn it, I'd love to get on that fucker and ride it all day long and just see the beauty of Colorado whiz past me. Oh yeah, that's a beautiful future, and that's something to look forward to. I'm fucking looking forward towards that. Sounds fucking awesome. Anyway, that's just a little breakdown of the truth behind DIA. It's an eyesore, it's a waste of taxpayer money, it's fucking pathetic, it's the country's worst fucking airport, and I fucking hate it. And I've never been to it, and I'm not going, and fuck it. It's a trash landscape, and is not indicative whatsoever of Denver. And as a Denverite, I adamantly reject it and everything it stands for. Anyway, that's been my little analysis of this scenario. Sayonara, suckers.